Hi, I'm Bart Hanson. I'm the owner and lead instructor for CrushLivePoker.com. The following hand comes from our call-in show that we record live at 2 p.m. Eastern Time every Monday. If you enjoy this video, hit that like button, and if you want to submit to be on the show, take a look at the information in the description.
This is from a round by round game. So this has kind of been my bread and butter game for a number of years here in Michigan as this is a private game, and I would always say, and I think you, especially as someone that plays as much O8 and now hopefully Big O as
I love
as
Big
you
O.
do, is that
Love Big O. Yeah.
well, you live in Texas now, so I hope you
Right.
love Big O.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that these, if you can get like, and you've said this, I know plenty of times, learning other variants of poker helps your main game.
Right.
And if you can find a game like I have been able to find where they will play multiple games, in this case it's No Limit and PLO, and you can get good at both, but you also can be elite at one, but also good in the other. Like, you really, really pound on people who just don't have the stuff that can do both games.
Yeah.
And I think that that's been like a big thing I've encouraged people that want to learn PLO is like, yeah, learn it well, because then if you can find a good round by round game, you're going to be at a huge, huge advantage.
Right.
So this is from a private 5-5 uncapped round by round game.
Okay.
It's like a mix of rec players. So we have, your typical rec players in these games. And then we also have some of the better players in the area that play in this game because it's untapped and it has played extremely big. We've seen people lose like six figures in this game before.
Okay.
And that's and it can also be a very quiet game. It kind of depends on the mix of the players.
Right.
But this hand happens to be against the other two top regs in the game, winning players. They've both won six-figure scores in tournaments, and they both are very good at cash.
Dash
and
Dudley?
Both professional.
Dash Dudley?
This is not a dash hand.
Oh, okay.
If you want a dash hand, I can give you a dash
No,
hand.
it's okay.
Dash does play in this game.
Oh,
but
okay.
Dash fortunately gave us a break, and he wasn't there on this particular night. But yeah, Dash is both of our boys.
So is this a straddled pot then at 5-5? No limit, or is it just straight 5-5?
Typically, it gets straddled, but mostly in the PLO rounds. You know how
Okay.
it gets gambly once
Right,
you turn to
right,
PLO.
right.
So No Limit actually plays very similar to what I think you'd find at a 5-5 No Limit table in a casino. It's the PLO that gets crazy in this one.
Yep. Okay.
So we have two other good regs and then myself, who happens to be the hero. And we start with 1,400.
Okay.
Villain 1, who will be relevant in the hand, does have us covered.
Yep.
Villain 2, we cover. Villain 2 has about 700.
Okay.
So the action folds to the hero in the hijack. We are dealt 8 of clubs, 8 of diamonds.
Okay.
So pocket 8s.
Yep.
And I open to 20, which has been the standard size open, about 4x in this game.
Open to 20. Okay.
So Villain 1 is behind us on the button.
Okay.
And he is very aggressive, and he was especially aggressive in earlier streets. I think he gets more standard as the hand continues to play on.
Okay.
So he 3-bets us to $60 on the button.
Okay.
And then Villain 2 in the big blind smooth calls.
And now it's back over to you.
Back over to me to close the action, and I decide to call.
Okay. So I'm sure that you have, even though you do play a lot of PLO and you're the PLO instructor on Crush Live Poker, I'm sure that you've taken in a lot of no limit content as well. One of the things here that I would say, like against any other call in, is that when somebody flat calls here, 3-bet in between, there's extra dead money out there. This is definitely late versus late. Hijack and having pocket 8s is really on the cusp. If I was in the cutoff, I would seriously consider 4-betting this hand. And I think once you start to get to 9s plus, it almost becomes a mandatory 4-bet late versus late. Here, it's probably I'm just saying that it's not always just, we're just calling 100% of the time. No, this is a 4-bet some of the time here. I know you're going to get into some awkward stack sizes, but you'd be, with that extra dead money out there, late versus late, and the 3-betting ranges being somewhat wide, you can definitely have a wider 4-betting range than what you would think. Obviously, it would just be a defend heads up. You open hijack to 20, button 3-bets to 60. You would just call for the most part. But with that extra dead money out there, you can sometimes 4-bet. This would be the bottom of it. Obviously, calling is not bad too. So you call, and we're at about $190, right, to the flop.
Yep, that's correct. And
Okay.
after years of being a faithful No Limit subscriber and listener to Bart Hanson's material, I thought that this was a flat in this case. But I do get what you're saying when it comes to especially that big blind in between is attacking that dead money. And I thought about it, but I did think ace was a little bit too light for me because if I get re-raised or if I have to play out of position against the button, let's say I do eliminate the big blind from the hand, I was concerned about having a tough stack size with him having position on me. So that's why I thought a flat might be better in this instance.
Okay. So we're gonna go 3 ways. Yep.
Okay. And then, of course, we hit a gin flop because otherwise this hand might not be that interesting. But the flop comes down, 8 of spades, 4 of hearts, 3 of hearts.
So you flop top set in this 3-way 3-bet pot.
That is correct.
Yep.
And on a very low board. So my hand tends to be not only obviously the best hand right now, but I'm not as worried about a lot of other stuff as if, I flop top set of jacks on Jack 10, 7 or something like that. So
Right.
I feel like this is a very static board considering
Yep.
it's a 3-bet no limit pot.
Uh,
So
yeah.
we good? All right. Big blind checks to us, which I kind of consider to be playing in flow from
Sure.
him.
Of course.
And then I think a lot of people would think the standard play is to check and let the button continue because the button probably should be betting his entire range on an 8-high board.
Mm-hmm.
I decided to mix it up and lead $100 here. 2 reasons why. One reason was I thought I could maybe induce a raise from his overpairs, or maybe like ace king of hearts or something like that, ace queen of hearts, or it would make my hand look more like a draw that was, trying to bet and see if I could get, to a turn without getting, raised or playing it a little bit less than I thought would be what would look like a set. So I decided to lead the flop instead.
Here's the thing. So it's definitely non-standard, right? It's very, very non-standard. This would be a play that I would make, back in the day, like leading out with a strong hand. And now I sort of tend to check and flow, like you were saying, to the pre-flop raiser, especially in a 3-bet pot, though I probably wasn't doing that much leading into a 3-bet pot with top set. It's hard to balance. Not that that is necessarily all that relevant. I guess you could be betting some of your sort of combo-ish types of draws like 5, 6 of hearts, but I like to take all those hands and do it as a check raise balance anyway. So I'd check raise my big hands, check raise my combo draws. If the button is competent, I don't know if he's going to be raising a whole lot of over pairs. Like if you led into me here and I was competent and you were competent, I don't know if I'm really like doing a whole lot of raising here. Because what's really the point here if I were to have like aces or kings? Now, if I was up against like a moron, but this doesn't usually typical happen in a 3-bet pot. It's sort of like in a single raise pot. I have certainly been known to raise over pairs on boards like this and also just raise as a bluff. So it is certainly non-standard. And there is no computer answer for this. There's no solver answer for this, like in a 3-bet pot, like, monk or solver. How often are you leading into the pre-flop 3-better? I've never seen any of those stats. And you could always make a computer type situation, like probably have a leading range, but I've never seen it. It's just very, very unorthodox. The reason why I would tend not to do it as much is because multi-way here, as opposed to sometimes getting tricky and doing it heads up, is because you're not going to get the call from ace highs because there's a guy behind you. So if the competent button here has like a hand like ace queen and you lead, he just has to fold. Whereas if you guys were heads up and you're like, well, I'm going to lead here. I'm going to get the calls from ace highs that are going to check back anyways. I'm going to play this. Maybe I'll induce some sort of bluff raise or something crazy. I can see that, but that would be the main reason why I wouldn't lead here multi-way from the middle into a 3-bet pot, because you're not going to get the ace high calls from the pre-flop 3-better, or he shouldn't call due to the fact that he shares sort of this multi-way he's got less responsibility to the pot because there's a guy behind him. So if you're in that guy's spot, if I'm in that guy's spot and I have ace king black, I can't really call all that much with a guy behind. So that's why it's a little bit non-standard. But okay, so you bet 100.
Yeah, and to your point then, Bart, just because from a theory standpoint, I'm interested, like, because of that, and because we're maybe putting him in awkward spots, I mean, should we be leading stuff like, let's say we get here with like 6-7 of hearts, gutter plus flush draw? Should we be leading that to try and clean up some of our equity against him and put him in a tough spot in between the two? Like,
I don't think
where,
it. I don't
where
think
can we lead? Where can we lead semi bluff?
Well, you're not going to be leading a whole lot of semi bluffs. I feel like in 3-bet pots multi-way. I mean, 3-bet pots multi-way. There's something going on anyways that's sort of suboptimal, right? Because it's very rare. Because somebody's going to have to have cold called in between. But I wouldn't really have a leading range in this particular spot, because it's not like if the ace high hands are going to check back on the flop, you can just start betting turn. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you're giving like some sort of free equity to overcards, offsuit overcards, right? Like if it gets checked through. But I would like to maximize sort of my fold equity, get the pot big with a combo draw in the form of a check raise, just like I would do with my big hands. And you also will sometimes get like bluffing equity from your opponent as well. Like if he see bets off ace queen, you check raise with 6-7 of hearts and he just folds. You see what I'm saying? So
yeah,
I don't know if I would have a leading range here all that much as a 3-bet in the middle. But okay, so you bet 100 and button calls, right?
Yep, that is correct. So villain 1 on the button just calls.
Yeah.
And now villain 2 wakes up and he check raises us to a small sizing, 250. So I went bet 100. We had just called. Now a check raise to 250 there. And obviously his range is a lot wider. He's a little splashier. What's your thought on that?
So villain 2 only has 700 to start, right, from the big blind?
Yeah, correct.
I mean, well, you sort of want to pull the button in here, right? Like if you put in a 3-bet here, if the button has an overpair, he's just going to assume that you have a set. You can't face 2 raises. Like if I'm the button and even if I have aces here and you bet, I call, check raise, and then you re-raise, the guy's just going to fold. So you sort of want to make your hand look like a draw. So at this point, I probably would want to call to pull the button in. I mean, you're not deep with this guy. If he's got like a set here, you blocking the top pairs, he could have a draw. I would just tend to just probably try to pull the button in here. It's interesting if you call and the button overcalls and the turn is like, say, a brick, like say like an offsuit jack, and then the big blind checks, you might actually check the turn. It's sort of really sort of fancy type of thing, but the flow of this hand is kind of odd, right? So you're calling the check raise, you're trying to pull the button in behind you, the button calls, and now let's say we get an offsuit, like I said, 10, offsuit jack, and now the big blind checks. I think at that point, you betting is sort of giving, like, it looks very, very strong, like you've got a huge hand. If you check, the guys should be betting off like with a lot of overpairs. So I actually might play it tricky if that were to happen. I'm just saying, for example, but I would call to try to pull the button in here.
Yeah, and I was thinking the exact same way because, like we said, we're 700 effective with villain 2, but we've got like another 700 on top.
Yeah.
With villain 1, and I can certainly, I think you're right, make my hand look much weaker by just flatting here. And in PLO, we often are saying, like, what can we do with clean runouts or dirty runouts?
Right.
And in this spot, I feel like there's so many good cards for me on the turn.
Right.
That I was feeling like, yeah, I probably could take that exact move, which is not even bet, and have the button try and go for it and shut us out or whatever.
So you called.
So anyway, yeah, I did.
Okay.
I decided to call.
Yep.
I felt like if I re-raised exactly what you said, my hand is absolutely face up.
And button calls behind you as well?
Yeah. So I call, and then he thinks for a while. He does not instantly call. So he thinks for a while and then decides to call.
Okay.
And so now the turn is a card I'm not entirely pleased with just because I feel like it can kill some action. It's the 5 of clubs.
So the pot is 904. I just want to recap for the podcast listeners. You raise with 8s in the hijack, button 3 bets to 60, villain 2 cold calls the big blind. And the board comes out 8-4-3 with 2 hearts where the 8 is not a heart. And check, you lead for 100, button calls, big blind check raises to 250, you call, button calls. You put in 750 on the turn, so the pot's like 940, and the big blind probably only has like 400 left or something. So what's the turn?
Yeah, so the turn's the 5 of clubs. So,
Okay.
you could see some sort of like ace wheel suited get there, but that's really the only thing that I'm very concerned with here.
Yep.
And then I was kind of hoping, I was trying to think about what I would do if the big blind checked here, because that did look like kind of like a dirty card. And I was not quite sure what I was going to do if it got checked to, but then the big blind just moved in because, like you said, he did not have much left as opposed to pot. And then here I decided that I wanted to try and invite the player behind me to overcall as well, so we could try and get to a river.
Yeah.
So I did just call, and then our villain thought for quite a long time, and then announced fold and held his cards, which meant he was going to show us what he folded because he obviously didn't want to.
Yeah.
And then he eventually revealed black aces on the button.
I mean, that's probably a pretty easy fold once the guy moves all in and you call. In between, this is kind of an interesting one because you're trying to like reel that button in. He does pick up a gut shot, sort of ass end wheel draw to a deuce. Big blind moves in for 400. You call, so the pot is like 1740. It's 400 for the button to call. I mean, if I was the button with aces, I don't think it would be like, oh, just an easy fold, because you've sort of played your hand kind of as a pull, like a draw, especially starting with the unorthodox lead out. Like, your hand does look like a flush draw. If he doesn't have the ace of hearts in his hand, I could see you having a lot of like nut flush draws here. So I think that you've sort of disguised your hand in the way that you've played it by just calling and calling. And he's getting like 4-1. I think it's just maybe he was like, well, the guy in the big blind must have him beat here too. But I don't know if I'd fold here. If I were him, and the pot would be 1740, 400 for me to call, and you guys have like, another 700 left, I might call and see the river and see what you do. Like if I call with black aces at the end and I'm your opponent on the turn, and the river's a brick, and there's a side pot, and then suddenly you jam on a brick, like I'm experienced enough in poker to realize that just can't be a bluff. Why would you be jamming into a dry side pot now, right? Like, you call the turn all in, I overcall with black aces, 8-4-3-5. I'm getting 4-1. Now the river is like an offsuit 9, right? You've got 700 left, and now you jam the river. Like, that's never a bluff, right? Like, I mean, so the more I think about it, the more that's a really, really tight fold by that guy. But it all starts because of your unorthodox flop play. So
yeah, because it really looks like the big blind has the set and I have the draw, right?
Yeah, or the big blind has something that he's overplaying. I mean, I think it looks like you have the draw, especially if I don't have the ace of hearts. It's just unfortunate that this guy folded. What did the big blind end up having?
So the big blind rolled a hand I was not expecting to see at all, because I think the pre-flop play was poor. And then I can kind of understand why he wanted to drive it. But he rolls ace of hearts, 8 of hearts. So he had top pair and the nut flush draw. And then he picked up the wheel gutter on the turn.
And then did you hold up?
I did hold up. Yeah, it was the exact card that we wanted on the turn. It was a black jack on the river.
Oh, okay. Jack X. But you see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? Like, say, for example, the button overcalled, right? The 400 all in on the turn. Like, the guy moves all in, you call, button calls. Now we're at the river, right? So we're at the river. The pot's 2140. You have 700 left. The river's a jack. There's no money on the side. 8-4-3-5 jack. What are you going to do at the end from up front? Ryan?
Sorry. I think this is a good question. I think because of pot size, I do want to jam, but your point about dry side pot and but then what am I trying to fold out there either? So I really need to have, and then I need to have it.
To take another level from this as well, and you know that, like, I advocate making super, super thin value bets, right, all the time. If that scenario were to come down where the big blind moves all in, you call on the turn, 8-4-3-5, and the button overcalls with black aces, right? And the pot's 2100. You have 700 in front of you with a dry side pot. And now the river's a jack. If you check, okay, and I have black aces there on the side, what do you think that I would do? And I want you to think about it for a second.
Okay.
What do you think the best play would be with someone with black aces on the river in that spot when check two in a dry side pot? If your button villain got there at the end and you check the river on a blackjack, given this action on 8-4-3-5, river's a jack, you have black aces, dry side pot, gets checked to you. What would you do?
I would check behind.
Yes.
I just don't see how
Yes.
I get called by worse.
Yes, you should check behind because your hand looks like it's a draw. There's no value in betting. So
Yeah.
there really isn't much value in checking from up front. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just like, but again,
can
if
we
I
check
was that guy with
300
aces,
off
it would
the
be really
700?
hard for me. It would be, you just wouldn't seem to be bluffing though either. So
what's the sickest play? If it's a $2,100 pot, I have 700 in front of me, and I bet like 350 on the river there.
yeah, maybe you
And
bet,
you have black
maybe you make
aces.
some
What
sort
are
of
you
like,
doing?
maybe you make some sort of ridiculous like block bet. Not all in, but you bet like 300. You know what I mean? You bet like 200 or 300. You just give the guy like some incredible price. That's probably, now that we talk it through, that's probably what the best play would be. You know?
Yeah, probably
So.
because it would be too sick to fold, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it would just be, yeah, it would be, you'd own the guy. You would own me if I decided to overcall, on the turn. But it's a weird dynamic with no money out there, no money in the side, right? When this guy looks to have a big hand. Ryan, I appreciate the call again. PLO battle plan. You do 2 videos a month, right? Excuse me.
I do
1 video a month and then 2 podcasts, right? So I want to say second Thursday of the week, right? Second Thursday of the month.
fourth Monday.
Yeah. Second Thursday, fourth Monday, 1 podcast, 1 video, and now we're doing it in an organizational way where it's just not random like PLO hands. We're kind of doing it in an organized fashion, so you can check it out over there. Thanks for calling in, Ryan. Hey guys, if you like what you've seen here, please hit the subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this call in hand, hit the like button down below. If you want to check out crushlivepoker.com, click on the link in the description. Use the code YTA200 to get the first 30 days for free.